Welcome, everyone, to the first Clinical Athlete Journal Club. I first want to thank Kevin for bringing this idea to life in the forum. He's going to help facilitate the discussion, and Kevin, we all really appreciate it. This is going to be a lot of fun, and
Yeah, of course, man.
hopefully something that we can carry on. And I want to thank Melanie Hudson for being our scribe tonight. She's going to take some notes about the discussion, and we'll post those in the forum along with the recording, so people who couldn't be here can follow along. I also wanted to thank Mark Manera for picking tonight's paper, which is titled "Bad is More Powerful Than Good: The Nocebo Response in Medical Consultations." And real quick, I made a poll. I want to kind of get a feel for the type of crew we have for tonight. It's one poll, or it's one question, and it's just describing if you're a student, a non-student, a coach, or a clinician. Oh, nice. Okay. 82% student clinicians, 18% clinician. Nice. So most of you guys are student clinicians. That's awesome. And lastly, I want to share a little story that reminds me of what we're trying to do here. So way back in the day, a smart guy named Benjamin Franklin started a weekly club. This is a true story. He started a weekly club that was called the Junto Club, Junto. It was a mutual, quote unquote, mutual improvement club. But it was basically just a room of really smart people discussing topics and issues of the day, kind of like what we're doing now. They had an important policy, though. And that policy was that all discussions would be conducted in the sincere spirit of inquiry after truth, without fondness of dispute or desire of victory. So I'll say that again. All discussions to be conducted in the sincere spirit of inquiry after truth, without fondness of dispute or desire of victory. So in other words, we're all on the same team, and we're just out here trying to be less wrong. So just keep that in mind. Let's have some fun, and we'll learn a little something. So, and then I'm going to have Mark actually go first. And this is not putting him on the spot because I kind of warned him of this, but just to get your initial thoughts of the article, Mark. So what'd you think of this piece?
So yeah, I really liked the articles. Well, I found it from doing the pain science CEU over my winter break, which was, thank you for giving that opportunity to everyone in the forum for free. But I thought it was awesome because, well, I think all the students here probably understand the concept, but at my school, I go to Maryville University. It's a small school in St. Louis. No one even knows what nocebo is, or even kind of the importance of language to our patients or to anyone, right? So it's been a huge for me because, well, my teachers seem to be even one of the worst, kind of the worst at it. We were talking about transfers and body mechanics and everything. And I understand the efficiency aspect of it, but my teacher told us after the whole transfer lecture that she had an aide at her clinic that picked up a pencil with a rounded back and hurt his back doing that. And it's just like, all right, you've got 40 PT students in the room hearing that, and if you don't have something like this, or outside learning and reading outside of school, you're going to go and spread that to every single person that you can't even pick up a pencil off the ground with a rounded back, or you're going to hurt yourself. So I've been sharing this article and other stuff that I'm learning, but I think that's almost everyone's probably experience within school. But after reading this article, one quote that really stood out to me was, it was talking about validation and invalidation. And the quote says, reassuring patients that there's nothing physically wrong with them when they are in a great deal of pain can be invalidating to them. And, after listening to all this stuff, I try and
Mark, and you can jump back in whenever we get that figured out. But I think you bring up some great points, and the validation or invalidation was a big part of this. Article, and in fact, that their whole one of their big things was the two psychological theories that dominate the literature now with placebo and nocebo are conditioning and expectations, which makes sense. You know, if we're conditioned for a certain response or we expect a certain response, and then something different happens that might mess with how we perceive reality. But then they were proposing that these concepts of validation and invalidation can be just as important. So, and just for everyone's FYI, they define those terms as well. So validation is the act of communicating acceptance and understanding to another person, and invalidation is the opposite. You're communicating non-understanding and non-acceptance to another. And what I found interesting was the differentiation they made between validation and invalidation versus empathy and compassion. Whereas validation and invalidation is the communication, either verbal or nonverbal, of empathy and compassion. So you can be empathetic to somebody, but you either validate or invalidate them based on what you say, do, your body language, etc. And they make a note of that as well. You may invalidate somebody unknowingly. Um, and they even gave an example of you think you're being understanding, like, oh yeah. You're totally fine. You're not broken. Your pain is no big deal. They might actually feel patronized or invalidated because they're the ones experiencing the negative situation. And here you are, you don't barely know them, and you're saying, basically your pain's not real or it's not that important. You can carry on, that type of thing. So we just have to be important, or have to be cognizant of how we're framing some things. We have to be sensitive because we can be doing those things without even realizing it. You guys have
Yeah,
thoughts?
I agree. That's kind of like where I got like the real crux of this issue is kind of that difference between empathy and validation. I think it's an area, like you said, we probably need to be much more careful in the way that we're wording things, like kind of adopting a dialogue or an approach that's more consistent with a message of, I really don't know what you're experiencing or kind of the pain that you're experiencing, but instead of, yes, I understand, or, that must be very hard. I think that's something that it's kind of hard to kind of wrap your mind around, this sort of underlying potential, outward of expression of being invalidating when you're just really trying to empathize with the person is something I hadn't considered a lot.
I think too, as being students, most of you guys are students. You've got so much going through your head with your patient interactions. I mean, I do too. You're worried about what you're going to test next. You're worried about what you're going to give them as far as exercises or the plan, and like what you're going to say. You got a million things running through your head, and the last thing you're thinking about is how you're framing the words, that how they're interpreting the words that you're saying. It's just, there's a lot that goes into that. I know that the GoToWebinar keeps like muting everyone. We're going to do this. We've got a solution. We'll forget the webcam until we figure that out, but there's a hand raising function. You can literally raise your digital hand, and I can see you, or Kevin and I can see you, and then we can unmute you if you have some input to say. Because Max, yeah, I know it keeps muting everyone. So there should be a hand icon, like a little raise your hand if you've got something to voice. Go ahead and press that, and I'll unmute you. I thought something was funny in the article. They were going over some literature on the subject, and they described a study in which the researchers used either validating or invalidating language, and it was the participants were doing math problems. I don't know the specifics, but the invalidating language was the researchers telling the participants, "I don't understand why you find this stressful. It's just adding and subtracting numbers." And so I laughed at that. I was like, "What? I wonder what the participants were thinking. Like, God, dickhead." And that's what they were trying to note was, with that type of communication, how is the participant going to respond? Will they rate the experiment as something that they would want to do again? And lo and behold, invalidating language created this type of negative effect. And that's a kind of an extreme example. Obviously, unless we're really, really frustrated, probably not going to talk like that to our patients. But the moral of the story on a lot of this stuff is just don't be a dick.